All right, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We are going to get started in just a second. All right, you are here at the Get Legit Education Series. We are the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Thursday, August 19th, 2021. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It is our hope that anyone interested in commercial cannabis here in Nevada County will take the time to tune into these webinars, educate themselves, and continue to be or become stewards of the environment and of our community here in Nevada County. This Get Legit Education Series provides the preparation necessary to assist in securing a local cultivation permit and a state cultivation license. The series includes webinars, just like this one, support groups, business skills trainings, and a mentor program. All of our Get Legit webinars are online. They are free of charge and open to the public. Each of these webinars will be recorded and all of them will be available to watch online through our Alliance website, nccannabisalliance.org. I want to acknowledge this is a very collaborative effort, this Get Legit Education Series, with the Nevada County Media, Nevada County Community Development Agency, the Nevada County Cannabis Compliance Division, the California Department of Cannabis Control, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the Division of Water Rights. I also want to give a shout out to a number of our sponsors that have really stuck with us here at the Alliance through the pandemic and all of the years. Shout out to Ag Natural, Gregerson Greenhouse, Vital Garden Supply, Hometown Hydroponics, Foresters Co-op, Moreland Consulting, Humboldt Seed Company, Grow Generation, SC Labs, and Rolling Hills Bookkeeping. Thank you so much. For those of you who are not familiar with the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, we are a nonprofit trade association representing the local cannabis community here in Nevada County. Our mission is threefold: educate, advocate, and connect. We are here to support public policy initiatives through representative advocacy, to provide educational opportunities, and create space for connection within the industry and the greater community. Some of the services that we provide for our members, we are a member-based organization, a consistent voice and representation locally and at the Capitol through our statewide partner Origins Council. We offer monthly industry affair calls on regenerative farming practices, business development skills, compliance needs. Some of our upcoming industry affair calls are, we have one coming up on market data insights with a company called Headsight, which is one of the leading market data analytical companies, specifically market trends on small flowers, small brands and flower here in California. We have one coming up on contracts and, during harvest season, making sure contracts with distributors and so forth and how those things work. We also have fall sessions coming up on harvesting best practices, rainwater catchment, cover cropping. All of these are recorded and available to our members to listen to at their leisure. We have, as I mentioned, a buddy program that pairs permitted farmers with new folks coming into the permitting process and interested in that. We have a Slack online resource hub that is for resource sharing, local policy updates, industry news, and just great form of communication. We also offer monthly farmer-to-farmer meetups for members to connect, share resources, and talk to one another, in addition to seasonal supply chain mixers when COVID safe. So with this webinar, the upcoming Get Legit webinars in this series, September 9th, we have our required environmental compliance. This is with the Water Board, Fish and Wildlife, and the Division of Water Rights. September 30th, we have the Nevada County Cannabis Cultivation Permits 101. That is with the Nevada County Cannabis Division, Compliance Division, as well as all other departments, the Planning Department, Ag, Fire, public works, environmental health, that you will need to know their regulations for the local permitting process. And then we have on October 14th, the state cannabis cultivation license with the Department of Cannabis Control going through those application processes. We offer support groups every Monday following these upcoming Get Legit webinars. The first one will be on Monday, September 13th from 3 to 4 p.m. These are incredibly useful ways to connect on where you're at in the permitting process, what type of questions are coming up. There are folks, consultants that come on, county staff members that join, licensed farmers. So definitely something to take advantage of. And just stay in touch with us. If you are not already a member of the Alliance, please do consider. We are truly stronger together as a community. We are on Facebook, Instagram. We send out bi-monthly newsletters. And you can always email us at info@nccannabisalliance.org. All right, so the format for tonight's webinar, we have a panel discussion. And I want everybody to see that there is both a chat section area as well as a Q&A section here on your Zoom screen. Feel free as the conversation is going to type in questions as they come up for you. We will make sure to get through all of those and talk about them. So your participation is encouraged. Ask questions that you have. That is, the more useful this will be for everybody. Our panel today consists of Julia Glass, who is with us from Birchville Botanicals, a licensed cannabis cultivation farm here in Nevada County. We have John Foley with Yellow Dog Family Farms, another licensed cultivation farm here in Nevada County. And we have Emily Porter, who is a local cannabis consultant who is extremely knowledgeable about the permitting processes. And we are led today by our Nevada County Alliance Executive Director, Diana Gamzon. And Diana, I'd love to hand it over to you to start us off.
Great, thank you, Maggie, and thank you, panelists and attendees, for being here. Can't wait for us to be back together, hopefully soon, when we used to host these in person. But let's get things started. I'm just going to, let's do some just roundtable introductions. If you could just share a little bit about your farm, how long you've been cultivating or been consultant, talk about that'd be great. I'll start with you, Emily.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Emily Porter, and I've been involved in cannabis cultivation in a traditional market sense for about 10 years. And I've been doing cannabis compliance and project management consulting here in Nevada County for around 3 years now. And I managed a licensed cultivation facility last year, 10,000 square foot mixed light. And right now I currently represent 20 different farms in the county that I work with. And I specialize mainly in helping legacy cultivators come into licensing.
Thank you. And Julia, and then we'll go to John after.
We're a small outdoor cultivator, a 10,000 square foot canopy. And we've been licensed. This is our 3rd year of licensure. We're coming into our 3rd year. Before that, in the other market, probably growing for 15, something like that. We grow bulk flower. We sell bulk flower right now. We don't do branding, and I guess that's it.
All right, John.
Thanks, Diana. My name is John Foley. I'm a licensed cultivator here in the county. I've been cultivating cannabis for over 20 years now. Like Julia, I was one of the first wave of applicants. I got licensed here in 2019, so this is our 3rd full season in operation. Like Maggie said, I own Yellow Dog Family Farms, which is a 2,500 square foot ML1 mixed light license. And then I also have a new farm in the works that'll be operational next year, which is 10,000 square feet of mixed light. Happy to be here. Thank you to the Alliance for putting these events on.
All right, thanks everyone. So we're gonna get down into the nitty gritty throughout this webinar on expected costs, timelines, considerations when you're thinking about getting permitted, advice, all of that. But I wanna start, I know that we probably have some people that this is just their flat, fresh, brand new. And so I just wanna start with just a kind of 360 view looking at this. What are, and I'll open up to whoever wants to popcorn this out, but could somebody explain the different growing styles that we have here in Nevada County as it relates to the different license types and how that correlates to some of the different business models that there are out here? I know there's been some names thrown around, mixed light, outdoor, etc. Yeah, John, please.
Sure. I mean, most of the farms here in Nevada County are either hold outdoor cultivation licenses like Julia, where it's exactly what it sounds like. You're growing cannabis outdoors. And there's two different distinctions of mixed light licenses, ML1 and ML2. The other majority of farmers here in the county hold an ML1 license, which is basically a very rudimentary mixed light deprivation setup. Pretty much what we would consider traditional light deprivation, which is mainly been, the main cultivation style over the last decade or so. An ML2 license is a little more intensive. It is like a commercial style greenhouse, usually with some level of automation, climate control, and supplemental lighting. There's a handful of these in the county. They're a little bit more, quite a bit more expensive to build out, but the demand for the product that comes out of those license types is a little bit higher at this point in time. And then of course there's indoor, which is straight, under lights, climate control, indoor setting.
We've got a call coming into the office. Would anyone else like to add something?
Well, I don't really know much about the different license types just because I've only, my approach has been pretty self-centered. It's just about what we were going to do. But there are things like cottage licenses, depending on what kind of business model you have and who's going to be working on your farm. There's different licenses through the state that are separate from the idea of they're driven more by who's on your farm and running it as opposed to your business, your growing style, like whether you're mixed light or this. And so within that, they have different costs and requirements that are more or less friendly depending on what you're going to do. Maybe Emily knows more about that. As being a consultant, she may have a better perspective on that.
Yeah, so it's really going to depend on whether or not you're using light deprivation techniques. So even if you're growing in a greenhouse, but you're not using light deprivation or supplemental lighting, you're still considered an outdoor facility and you get an outdoor license. Mixed light license, like John was saying, it's going to depend on your cultivation style. If you're depping at all, you're mixed light. If you have supplemental lighting, there's a threshold between mixed light 1 and mixed light 2. If you're using more than, I believe it's 24 watts per square foot, you become a mixed light, or more than 6 watts per square foot, I'm sorry. That is the threshold. You become a mixed light tier 2. And that is a little bit, it's more expensive. And the assumption is that you're going to have a more consistent product that's worth more, I believe is why they make it more expensive. If you are using more than 24 watts per square foot, even if you're using the sun and you're using supplemental lighting, you're going to have an indoor license, even if you're in a greenhouse. So that's the main definitions. The sizing is going to depend. The state sets thresholds and they get larger and larger, and whatever license you choose in your license style is going to depend on what your parcel can do under the county ordinance. I think that's the main decision-making points there.
Thanks, everyone. That's really helpful just in terms of setting the landscape of what we have available here and the different styles that we have here. So I want to go into a little bit more detail now about the timeline. And as people are just starting to consider if they're going to go into this or what this could look like. What are some of, if you could share your experience with some of the timeline considerations? And Emily, let's start with you, because I think you've got a variety of perspectives to look at with the many people that you've represented.
Yeah, the timeline issue, it's really site specific. You know, the water board and the CDFW permits that you'll have to submit for a lake and stream bed alteration agreement and get your notice of applicability through the water board. Both of those take usually about 30 days to get a response from those agencies. So I always recommend they're one of the first things to get tackled by farm as soon as you have an idea about what your site's gonna be, you know, the project. If you have grading and all that good information you're going to need to have in hand before you jump into these permits. Those two are the first, because they don't take very long and you're going to build on that. The state right now is taking a lot longer than a lot of us are expecting for responses. I don't know if, John, you can talk about how your 10,000 square foot license is progressing. This year, I've definitely noticed that the CDFA licenses they're taking much longer than anticipated. I used to anticipate about 90 days to get a license, as long as you don't have deficiencies. That was pretty normal last year. This year, I have some applicants that are going on 5 months. They have no deficiencies, and it's just taking a very long time, especially with the DCC taking on their role. I feel like that really created this stagnant month last month where not a lot of progress was made, unfortunately. So I would say it's depending on how complex your project is, you're looking at 4 months to 6 months for the ADE, and that's really what it comes down to. The state, I always recommend to start that early as you realistically can. Make sure that you follow up your state application within 60 days. You need to submit your county application. Otherwise, your state will become disqualified. So ideally, submit things around the same time, but anticipate that it's going to take a lot of patience to get through the state right now. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. You have a lot of documents that need to be prepared, and then you have to wait a decent amount of time first for administrative review to pass all of your background documents, your ownership documents, make sure all your signatures are on all of your license applications, and that you have your signatures on your lease and things like that. And if you don't have a deficiency, you'll move forward to scientific review. And as long as you don't have massive problems with your site regarding, is your water, can you actually use your water source? Do you have a proper site plan that details everything point for point that they're going to want to see? Then, you know, that's realistic that you could have 4 months to your state license. I had one this year that was 3.5 months, and that was great. But like I said, it's taking exponentially longer this year than anticipated. So give yourself plenty of time. I'd say like 4 to 6 months is pretty reasonable expectation for CDFA. The county is a little more complicated, as we've all been continuously learning the past few years. The more complicated your project gets, the more pieces are involved. Do you have an as-built grading plan? Do you need a geotechnical engineer? Are you encroaching on a water source? Do you need a biologist involved? Do you need a management plan? Do you need a professional forester to come out? And do you need less than 3 acre timber exemption conversion permit? Do you need road work? There's a lot of different pieces that can drag this process out longer than you might think when you look at the permit process. It takes 30 days for the county to respond, at least 30 days for the county to respond to your first submittal. I'd say it's realistic to expect your engineers to respond and have prepared corrections within 60 days, and then you have another 30 days. Most projects I'm noticing are getting through within 2 submittals. So you're looking at 4 months in a perfect, simple project to get through the county. That's a pretty reasonable expectation. If your project's more complicated and it includes grading plans and commercial building plans and roadway improvements, things like that can definitely drag that on longer, especially if you don't address them prior to your first submittal. If you have surprises, give your engineer and your architect time to adjust to those. And you might be looking at 6 months and then you have to build out. So always start as soon as you can. Right now is a great time to start because you have the entire winter season to work on this and hopefully be prepared for the spring. So
Thanks for that, Emily. And John, that was a really, really useful information. John, you have a unique perspective because you had a permit process about 3 years ago, and now you're going through it as well on another property. So would you share your experience with timelines and what to expect?
Sure. Yeah, Emily said it perfectly. For whatever reason, whether it be the combined of the agencies, the state is the one that's taking the longest time now, or longer than they have in the past. When I first applied, the state license came out really quick, and the county was the slower process. For me on this new one, that was reversed. The county, and like Emily said, I made my project very simple. It was approved in about 3 months by the county. And I'm still waiting on the state license. I was expecting the state license to come through in the middle of July, and was planning on getting a run-in out there, and that didn't happen this year because I was still waiting. So it is what it is. But as far as timelines and Costco, I mean, there's a saying in the cannabis industry: everything takes twice as much time and costs twice as much money as you think it's going to take and cost. And it's the truth. So hold that little nugget of information close, because there's just so many unknown variables. Like Emily said, it's extremely site specific. It's based on your property. What kind of grading do you have to do? What infrastructure is in place? What's up to code? What's not up to code? How significant is your project? All these things factor in to the amount of time it takes and the amount of money it costs. So I know, a lot of these consultants, they say, put everything you want to do on paper, think of what you want your farm to look like in 10 years and let's put it all on paper. And I would recommend doing the opposite of that. Keep it very simple. Keep your costs, especially right now, keep your costs as low as possible. Simplify your project, and you'll get through the process a lot quicker. And then make amendments, as you want to upgrade infrastructure or your business model changes. But simplify. That's would be my advice.
Thank you, John. And one thing I want to add, and this is really important as it relates to timelines, is that the applicant, you, the farmer, must be your own advocate in this process as you are moving through your permit process, both with the county and with the state. And what that means is that you, as the applicant, know when things are supposed to be due, when you're supposed to hear back from the county, the agency, the regulatory agency, that you're following up. Some people work with consultants, some people don't. But regardless, if you're working with a consultant or not, you must be the general contractor of your project and know the timelines, because way too many farmers have relied on whether it's an engineer or a consultant or somebody to do work for them, and things slip through the cracks, something happens, and it really impacts both their timeline, but it can also impact when they're getting planned. So be your own general contractor. Julia, is there anything that you would like to add to the discussion around timelines?
Well, I think that what you're saying there is a good point, and I agree with Emily and John that things with the state seem to be very slow. Like since doing this consolidation, and like one thing, especially with the state permit, is like they'll put things out on the website, and you don't have any clue like that they're there waiting to be answered. So you have to go out, you have to check. If you don't hear back, you have to call. So I think that's a very important point, that if the timeline is important or you're on a tight timeline, you do need to get out there and be the squeaky wheel. And people will respond to that. They get back to you if you ask.
Okay. And just real quickly, we're going to get into some costs and talk about market conditions in a moment here. But I just want to say, we get questions a lot here in the office. All right, well, where do I start? What's the very first thing you do? And we always tell people, first thing you do is start assessing your property and get your site plan together. Just a quick round robin. What's your first thing you do? Let's start with you, Julia.
Well, to me, I think that before you do anything, you need to figure out what you want to do as a cultivator. I think that because that shapes everything. Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to make just enough money to say you've been working in the traditional market and that's been your bread and butter? Is that what you want to keep doing? Do you want to be building a business that then in 3 to 5 years you turn over and sell for millions of dollars? Like, what is your goal? And then that's going to shape everything. So that's, to me, the very first question, is to define how you're approaching this business and what your plans are, because then that will shape all your other decisions.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Julia. John, first thing that you do.
I would totally agree with Julia. I mean, before you even think about getting licensed or making these improvements to your property and going through the process, imagine yourself at the finish line and you've made it now and you're operational. Where are you going to sell your weed? Like, that should be your number one question. Who is going to buy my product? Because if you don't know the answer to that question, you need to reconsider doing what you're doing. It's important. I mean, in the old days, right, you grew it and eventually someone would buy it. Well, I mean, the landscape of the industry is just changing so quickly. Like Julia said, you need to know exactly what your goals are, what your business plan is, and whether or not you have the means to do it. But I mean, these are the questions you need to ask first before you even start spending money and going through the permitting process.
I think another thing that I would point out here, which is about anybody who, I think that people are coming from a traditional market perspective. It's like we love growing. There's nothing better than going out and seeing your plants and hanging out with your plants and doing all of that. So, one of the things about getting licensed is that a lot of that disappears. A lot of the things that you love about growing disappears. Like, your cannabis is now this commodity that gets turned into dust and extracts and things like that. And the idea of having this, beautiful harvest that you appreciate, it kind of goes out the window. And this is a thing that happens with anybody who wants to monetize something that they're passionate about, is that when you do that, then 90% of what you do then goes into marketing, management, licensing, compliance, record keeping, documentation. So that is the kind of big transition there too, and to realize that if you're going to, the way that you're interfacing with cannabis is going to change completely into this much more administrative, technical relationship.
Thanks for that, Julia.
Just to follow up, that's a really good point, because it's not like my time now is maybe spent half in the garden, like, it's not just about growing plants anymore. It's about running a business in the most regulated industry in the most regulated state in the union. And the amount involved is very real, so it's not just, I would love to just stroll through the garden and grow my plants and harvest and that's that, but that's just not the business anymore. It's different now. You're running a business and you have to be prepared to make that transition.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Emily, what is the first thing someone does when they want to start their permitting process? And then we're going to go on to talk about costs.
Are we talking about like if they wanted to start right now, like plans for
They
next year?
wanted to start right now. What is the first thing that they do?
I'll give you my little laundry list I made here. I would say like start now. Take your time going over your details before submitting your permit so you can minimize your deficiencies. So work with your engineer, your architect, your consultant, and start by doing what I call a site viability assessment. So look into the history of your property. What are you getting yourself into? Is there any existing grading? Like John and Julia both mentioned, are the structures permitted? What does your site entail? You have a good idea, and then narrow your plan down so that it's simple, it's reasonably accessible to you. Like we've been mentioning, you can always make an amendment in the future. So make sure you can actually achieve the goal that you're going for before you jump into this. I would also say don't forget to start your DFW and your water board permits first. Those are the first things you want to jump into. Once you have a site plan and your engineer says, yes, this is what we're doing, this is going to work. From the start, that's the first things you need to do because you're going to need that to move forward with everything else. Also, start your business development and your formation of your business in advance so that your applications are smooth and the information you need is available. Go line for line through the ADP application or CCP application, CDFA application, literally line for line. There's no reason that you're going to miss anything other than confusion or negligence. Like everything should be spelled out for you. Make sure you have those documents in order and that you're working towards having that information available to you. Don't take any actions until your permits and plans are issued. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and start grading or start doing your road improvements before your plans are issued. Don't start building houses until you have a permit. Don't dig a septic system or a well. It's really important. Don't even put up an ag exempt hoop house. It needs to all be finalized, or you're going to get yourself into a longer timeline, more trouble, code enforcement issues. Just try your very best to be patient. I know a lot of us are doers. We want to get out there. You want to break ground. Just take some deep breaths and wait. It might have to happen in a few months. Be realistic about your timeline before getting into this. Don't expect, submit your application in March and have plants in the ground by April. It's not going to happen. Try and be wise about when you enter into this process so that you can give yourself and your designer enough time to make a good plan and to make a proper application.
That's great.
That's my list.
That's awesome. Thank you,
Yeah.
Emily. That is a great list to get started. Thanks a lot. All right, so let's go into some of the expected costs. What are the ranges on the low end, on the high end? And, I understand, there'll definitely be costs for both, the permitting costs for there's so many regulating agencies. So there's the permitting costs and then there's the build out costs. And so I'd love to focus some time on the range of those costs. And also as you're answering, any unexpected costs that people should know about that sneak in. Who wants to get us started? Start with you, Julia, how about?
Well, for us, because our approach is, pretty simple. We basically just put plants in the ground. That's all we do. And so our setup is really simple, but the unexpected costs were the professional, like we did everything ourselves. We have Brad and I have a skill set where we built our own home, did our own plans, did all that. So we did everything ourselves. And we ended up, because of the commercial requirements, having to hire professionals to do things like they made us do an acoustical study with the sound engineer because we had more than 4 box fans. So that was something that was, things like that will be coming up. That was the biggest unexpected cost, was the needing to hire professionals to do things, and then some of the infrastructure build outs that we were required to do because we were thinking of it more like an agricultural venture than a commercial one. So those were the unexpected costs.
for a simple garden like yours, plants in the ground, outdoor, can you give our listeners a low end to a high end, just some sort of a range to visualize the potential costs?
Well, for us, let's see, I would say that for professional fees, we'll end up spending between $15,000 and $20,000. That's like to architects, planners, studies people, like we have to permit an as-built building, and so we had to have a guy come out with ground penetrating radar to evaluate our slab, things like that, for a little shed. It's like a little tough shed. And then the infrastructure that we had to do to our site itself was probably around $50,000 between different types of development that we had to do to like for like fire regulations. We had to you have to gravel like a hammerhead turnaround, do these things. And so I'd say that, for us, the whole thing, and then the licensing and the initial permits, that's going to be, in the county, if you're just paying your licensing fees, it's going to be, $5,000 to $6,000, depending on what type of license you've got. Actually, maybe more like 5 to 10 if you have a mixed light one, the different requirements. And then you have ongoing water board fees and things like that. So I would say that on a yearly basis, it's going to be at least $10,000 to keep your license, with all the different permits that you have to pay and little things that you have to do. So that's kind of the ballpark.
Thank you, Julia. And John, what has your experience been, and just talking to other farmers, where do you see the range, and especially with different growing styles? And
Sure. I mean, so much of it is site specific. It really depends on your property and what you're trying to do. If you're growing outdoor, obviously the costs are going to be lower than if you're growing mixed light. If you're growing mixed light 1 and you want to upgrade to mixed light 2, the costs are going to be significantly more for that. So it's just, the grading is that's a big hidden cost. If you need to make a flat spot to build a steel building or something like that, or put greenhouses up. So, I mean, all of these are variable costs. And then it depends on what kind of infrastructure you need. As far as the county is concerned, if you want to dry and process your cannabis, you need a commercial building to do so, to do it compliantly. So you're looking at building a commercial F1 structure on an ag parcel. Well, I mean, that could be $100 to $200 a square foot. Simple, hoop houses, you can go as simple as bending PVC and pulling tarps on it. Or if you go up to, an ML2 commercial style greenhouse, you're probably looking at $1,000 a square foot to build it. So, I mean, there's a varying sliding scale of cost. But like Emily said, getting a baseline assessment done of your property is the number one thing. That's going to give you an idea of, hey, I just need to grade a road to get to my cultivation site. How much is that going to cost? So that baseline assessment is very important. And I said it in the chat, but it's really important to work with a vetted design professional that has experience in commercial land development, because there's a lot of, I hate to say it, Emily, you're one of the good ones, but there's a lot of snake oil salesmen, consultants out there that will lead you down the wrong path because they don't know how to do it, So it's important to work with someone that's vetted, meaning that they have worked with clients that have had licenses approved by the county and the state. And they're going to be able to come out and do that baseline assessment for you. They're going to give you a ballpark based on the business model that you want, what your goal is, and then they'll give you a realistic assessment on what it's going to cost. Then you might change up your business model a little bit, but that baseline assessment is important because every property is different. And, you know, things as simple as, like Julia said, permitting a little tough shed becomes, you know, something that's a $10,000 hit. You know what I mean? So there are lots of these unexpected expenses. So I can't stress enough, work with someone that has been through it and done it. You know, don't be someone's first client and we're gonna, oh, we'll figure it out together. You know, that's what we already did that shit. You don't need to do it again. There's people that know how to do it now.
I think that one thing to point out too is like when I got permitted that first round, like in 2019, things were a moving target, really a moving target. And now they're settled into, you know, a lot of things that weren't clear then are clear now, like what they want you to do, what they will and won't let you do. Like Emily, like, you know, was talking about, you know, having it planned before you start. Well, you know, we had a garden already that we had to bring up to code. So that's a kind of different than somebody who's going to go, okay, now I'm going to develop a garden here. And now everybody is in that boat because they're not just letting you go, oh yeah, I have a garden, let's license it. It's not like that now the way it was 2 or 3 years ago.
So true. And I want to throw in also that, you know, vet your consultants 100%. We have on our website it's a 10 questions to ask your consultant as you're hiring them. And also, do not take a realtor's advice or word that you can grow on your property. That is very, very important. There are also a variety of realtors out there. And if you ask a realtor, well, can I grow on this property? They say, oh yeah, you do your due diligence. Call our office. We have a lot of resources and support for you here at the Alliance. In a couple weeks, we are releasing a document called Assessing Your Land for Commercial Cultivation to help people. So reach out to us and any of the really wonderful vetted consultants. Emily, I want to hand it to you to get your opinion on the range of various costs and unexpected costs, what your thoughts are on that.
Ooh, it's really so project specific. Like we've been saying, it's a challenge. Like I say, like Julia mentioned, where your legacy farm, you have a site that's already set up. Hopefully that location is going to work for you. It's really sad when you have to move a garden site that has worked for you for like a decade and for whatever reason you can't use it. That's definitely disheartening. Unexpected costs of all projects in general that I'm seeing, whether you're an existing location or a new location, is roadways. A lot of people are really struggling with access to their cultivation site, and especially if you have a commercial structure there, whether that's a commercially permitted greenhouse or if it's a processing facility, harvest storage area, that building is going to definitely need to meet fire safety access standards, and that's going to be dependent upon your area in the county as well. Your fire chief is going to be the last word on that, and I find a lot of people are disheartened by the amount of road work that can sometimes be entailed. Even if you have like a simple tough shed that you want to use as a harvest storage space, that tough shed is still going to need to be accessible to the fire department. And that's going to have to be done before you can start growing. That's definitely a cost that can eat up most of your budget. Grading plans as well. Be really careful with as-built grading. You know, if you need to get an engineer out there and get an as-built grading plan, just do it. It's really not, it takes longer and it's more expensive, but it's better to just start that now and be aware of it prior to jumping headfirst into the process. I find that most of the surprise costs actually come after the licensing, when you need to, if you need to have insurance and you need to have workers' compensation and you need to get your weighmaster certificate. There's continued compliance and your taxes. Those tend to surprise people. Those are the big ones for me right now. The cost of permitting, it's really challenging to pin that down. Your water board permit is every year. If you're a tier 1 facility, it's $600. It's not very much. It can get more expensive depending on the size of your development. Your CDFW permit more than likely is going to get refunded if you don't need a lake and stream bed alteration agreement. If you guys have gone through one of those and you got a letter saying it's not needed, make sure you got your refund because they'll refund it for you. CDFA, it can get rather expensive depending on the size and cultivation type that you're going for. In this county, if you had a small mixed light tier 1 facility, you're looking at $11,800 a year for your annual license, and that's due the day that you want your license to start. So once it's approved, if you're ready to start growing, you have to pay that on the nose every year. So be prepared for that when you're making your business plan. That shouldn't be a surprise, but make sure that you can handle paying that routinely when it's due. Your county application, for an ADP, it's $2,022.52, I believe was the last increase. And then that does not account for any additional review time. So if you have a secondary submission, you have corrections you need to make, that's going to be billed to you on staff time. So it hopefully shouldn't be more than a few $100s, but if you find yourself having many different submissions, you're going to still have to pay for staff review time. Once your ACP gets granted, I believe it's $980. It's close, yeah. It's an annual fee if you have an ACP every year. It's just not very much. The infrastructure, I think, really is what eats away at most of the permitting cost. And unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all answer for that. Like Julia was saying, you're going to probably need to do some commercial road expansion, things like a hammerhead turnout, or if you have a driveway, you might need to make some turnouts along your driveway in case you need to have a vehicle leaving while one is approaching. If you have buildings, you're going to need to build water storage and a hydrant that's going to be in a place that's accessible to the fire department who are responding. And these are actually really important. I know recently one of our licensed farmers had their fire water storage used in response to a local fire. So they're great to have. Was that you, John? Did you raise your hand? No? Oh, yes, good. Yes, it was great. It's good for the community. It makes you feel safer. But that is something you'll have to do if you want to have buildings.
Thanks for that, Emily. Yes, that is true. One of our members of the Alliance recently, as of last week, their fire hydrant was used and their water storage was used due to a fire on a neighboring parcel. And there was a dozen fire trucks on that property, and the property was completely safe, of course, because of the commercial fire requirements. So yeah, the water storage and the hydrant, you know, depending on if you do it yourself or you hire someone to do it, it could cost $5,000-$7,000, maybe less if you do it yourself, but it is so worth it. So worth it. I want to say, oh yes, John.
Just to follow up on Emily's point real quick, there are set costs for a lot of these things, for a lot of your license fees, for the application itself. You know, as far as like those things, it's obviously you can put those into your budget every year that you know those are reoccurring costs. And as far as like the county, I mean, the permit fees in this county are relatively low. Where it starts getting expensive, like she said, is the infrastructure. And those are the things that can really have those unknown variables. So it's important to budget the things that you know exactly every year at the same time. You're going to be paying those, the water board, your state license, your county license, and then you have to factor in your infrastructure budget. So it's really important. And then of course the taxes too. So, you know, just like anything, the better you grow, the more money you make, the more you pay in taxes. So, you know, they're all factors, but they all have to be accounted for because at the end of the day, all those bills are due.
The other thing behind taxes is that because cannabis is a Schedule 1 narcotic. It falls under restrictions from your federal income tax submissions. There are, because it's illegal federally, you can only, there's no business deductions in the traditional sense. So if you have a business model, you think, oh, well, I'm going to spend this on this and this, and then that's all expended. You can't declare a lot of that on your federal tax return. So you end up paying more taxes because you show more income because you have no deductions. And that whole thing is a long and complicated explanation, but you're going to need good bookkeeping, accounting in order to support your tax returns to give you the best benefit. Just to put that out there.
Great point. And we have a Get Legit workshop just on this topic that if anybody is interested in diving deeper into this, reach out to us and we can share with you the webinar about this. And we will also have another one this upcoming year because it's definitely an in-depth topic. I want to say one thing about timelines, and then we're going to go into a topic that is incredibly important to the future of this industry and market conditions and things like that. But I do want to mention something about timelines, which I failed to mention earlier, which is that for the past 3 years, we have worked with the county in the spirit of helping encourage people into the permitting process, that while your permit was being finalized, people could put their plants in the ground before they got their final sign off. It's called the Plants in the Ground policy, and it allowed a lot of our first-year farmers, second-year farmers, and then this-year farmers to get in while things were being finalized. That is not going to be the case next year. So it is even more crucial that farmers get started early, get started right now if you are thinking about next year, and you want to put your plants in the ground by the spring time frame. So reach out to us if you have any questions about that, but you 100% must get started earlier. We used to tell people, get your applications in by the end of the year. No longer. Get your applications in by early fall, the latest, if you are planning to grow next year. And like people have said, different growing styles have different timelines. If you're getting a permitted greenhouse, it could take over a year with the different infrastructure improvements you need to do. So that's a timeline consideration to keep in mind for this upcoming year. All right, we are going to switch gears a little bit, and we are going to talk about current market conditions and how that is impacting your current situation, your future plans. And then after that, we're going to talk about advice to new applicants and people who are considering the permit process and questions people need to ask themselves before they get started. So but let's start with current market conditions and how that is impacting your current and future plans. John, I want to get started with you, and then we'll go to Julia, and we'll go to Emily after.
Market conditions. Ooh, they suck. Right now, they're down probably 50% from where they were at this. Prices are down 50% from where they were at this time last year, and that's if you can find a buyer. You have multiple things happening. You have huge license stacked farms. There's 5-10 acre farms all over the state that are flooding product into the legal distros, basically saying name your price, because everyone's desperate at this point. And it's not just small farms, it's the big farms too. Everyone's hurting right now. Everyone is overtaxed, overregulated, and the ripple effect is now being felt throughout the entire cannabis industry. It's really, the state has screwed this thing up pretty poorly. And then you have a ton of, product flooding in from Oregon. Oklahoma's throwing a whole wrench into things right now. So the market is really, there's kind of a, to be completely honest, there's like a sense of panic that's being spread through the industry right now. It's just slow in general. Buyers aren't buying. There's a glut of product. As a result, it's driving down the price. And so, as small farms, as you know, as small farms where you have a limited supply, it's concerning. So, you know, like I said in the beginning, like you need to make, you kind of want to have some relationships built on the front end. You need to start networking. You need to talk with people in the industry and see how they're doing. You know, because they have 3 or 4 year head start on you. You know what I mean? So it's the relationships are going to be crucial moving forward. And at the same time, you know, it's not just the growers are struggling; it's the whole supply chain. So it's an interesting time to be in the regulated marketplace, but it's going to take some specialized business models. It's going to take some very creative thinking, which is something the Alliance is constantly doing, of how our regional small farms can have their place in the marketplace. And things are going to be tough here for the next couple of years. So it's important to make an informed decision. It's not the time to just jump in blindly. I'll say that.
That is the hard truth, the real truth that we all need to be considering. Thanks for that, John. Julia, let's go to you next.
Well, like kind of to mark on that is like now, you know, this is like a business venture now, and one of the biggest failures of new business is insufficient funding. You need to be able to have enough money to weather this kind of market condition. So like we're sitting on, you know, 60 pounds of beautiful hand trimmed flower that we can't sell at any price to anyone. And so that's what's happening for us from our last year's harvest. And the prices are, you know, when things are selling, it's in the $400 and $500 range or even less for outdoor. So I'm assuming that that's one of the reasons why John is going to mixed light, because those markets are holding more. The indoor and the mixed light greenhouse flower isn't as depressed as outdoor flower. So, and I don't know where the extract markets and things like that are going, or in terms of that, but in general, I'm not getting phone calls like I used to, like 2 or 3 times a week from people looking for trim or flower. There's like nothing coming across right now. So you just have to bite the bullet and weather the storm. And I do agree. I've been very kind of hadn't really thought about it, but we are overtaxed. I think that cultivators are overtaxed. I don't know about the dispensaries or all of that, but I think that the level of taxation on cultivators is extremely damaging, because then we're at the end of the market chain, so we always get the lowest amount. So if California were smart, they would lift the cultivation tax or make it something reasonable. 154 a pound, it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous amount. So it drives the price up for the distributors, and then it drives it up for the consumers. It's ridiculous. And I belong to a network of cannabis accounting and financial professionals. So I talk with people all over the country about cannabis businesses, and the fact that California is allowing counties to do prohibition, like Massachusetts and these other states that are legalizing cannabis now. They're not allowing people to say, oh no, you can't sell cannabis here, you can't grow cannabis here. So that's been a big problem in California, because so few counties are allowing dispensaries that we don't have enough of a market to sell our product, and that's really damaging. So hopefully there might be some kind of turnaround on that. I don't know. Did that answer the question? I kind of rambled.
Yeah, no, Julia, that was spot on. And I will say this, is that we are, the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, we are statewide partners with an advocacy association called Origins Council. And one of the exciting initiatives for everyone to know about is that there is definitely talk about, and not just talk, there is advocacy being done right now to eliminate that cultivation tax. And so we'll be putting updates on our internal member communication channels, as well as in the newsletters on developments for that, because that's that's needed.
I also
yeah.
just wanted to say that I do have faith that ultimately there will be markets able to be developed for, craft artisanal flower. There always is going to be a market for that. The question is hooking that up with the right distributors, the right vendors and things like that. So, but the thing is those are relationships that take time to build, markets that take time to build. So you have to be prepared to take the time to build them from a sales perspective.
You've got that. And one of the, as a trade association, one of the exciting things that we're working on for this upcoming year is responding to, we are a legacy craft cannabis community here in Nevada County. And in this upcoming year, or this past year, we've been working with our members to get member feedback, member input, and we are really excited for the push that we are currently working on in this upcoming year to really hone our local policy, center it around tourism, events, micro business license, really responding to the needs of the farmers for their ability to create value-added products on the farm, help support our co-ops and those farmers that are working together for distribution networks, et cetera. So everyone should be stay tuned to some of these opportunities that we're going to have in the upcoming months to really tell our story about how we're building this craft industry here and our plan for resilience. We are going to move on to Emma. Yes, John.
Julia made a really good point. Yes, there definitely there's hope. I mean, the market, you have to think this whole thing is still kind of like in its infancy, and the market eventually will mature, and a connoisseur market will kind of form, especially with Sunground. Unfortunately, it's just not there yet, so like she was saying, you have to be prepared for these slow times, because right now there is no middle ground. People either want very high-end indoor, or they want, I'm talking about when they go into a dispensary, they either want top shelf, or they want as much weed as they can buy for their money, so there's not really a middle ground. So you have to think about, when you're getting into this, where do I fit in? What am I trying to be a supplier for? Because even really high-end mixed light that's not supplemental is still lumped down into that outdoor category, so it is where it is. There's no middle ground right now. So you have to be prepared to ride out the tough times until the market has a chance to mature, because it's just not there yet.
Thank you, John. Yeah, and that's exactly true. We're in it for the long haul here in Nevada County. That's for sure. Emily, let me turn it over to you about your thoughts on market conditions and how you've seen that impact perhaps your clients and their future plans.
I feel like John and Julia have covered a lot of considerations going into this and maintaining a business in this particular climate. One thing I did notice last year I was involved in selling our licensed product on the farm that I was the compliance manager for. And one thing I did not anticipate is how important THC content was going to be to purchasers. I myself am a big fan of lower THC content flower. It's just as enjoyable to me. I think the entourage effect is incredibly important. However, purchasers don't necessarily have the same idea about what quality cannabis is as cultivators may. You may create a product that you think is absolutely beautiful and wonderful in every way, and it might not receive the same interpretation by a purchaser. And it's disappointing, but the best we can really do as a community is continue to try to educate our consumers and try and educate people buying cannabis about where does it come from? Does it, is it boutique cannabis? What does that mean? When you support a sun-grown farm, what does that mean? There are farms that are dry farms. I think that is so interesting. You know, how does the elevation of where it's grown impact its terpene profile? There's so much beauty and expression in cannabis that I feel like gets overlooked, and we are up against just thousands and thousands of pounds of boof from the Central Valley. You know, like we have an uphill battle there as small farmers, but you kind of also have an ace up your sleeve. You've got the fact that you are a small farmer, you're a boutique cannabis producer, and there is a small but growing amount of people who are really interested in purchasing that specifically, or environmentally consciously cultivated cannabis, or cannabis grown by a woman-owned company, or cannabis grown by people of color. Like there's all these little pieces that you can use to differentiate yourself, either as a brand or even just as a wholesaler. You can still hold a place in that market, but it's very important to create connections, and not only with someone who's just willing to buy your cannabis, but someone who is continually willing to buy your cannabis. Try and find a distributor or a brand that you like working with, that you trust, multiple brands that you can trust to continue to come back, build that relationship. It truly is very important. In the traditional market, we've all experienced how important that supply chain connection is. Can you trust your purchaser? You know, are you as a cultivator producing a consistent quality product? And if you two can trust each other on both ends of that, you have a much more stable place in the industry. But, you know, let's not sugarcoat it. It's really tough right now. I think from my place looking in on things, that the licensed market is doing much better than the traditional market. We're not seeing quite the same fluctuation and desperation, but it's tough, you know, and it's good to have an idea that you're going to go into this and you're going to need to put a lot of energy into selling your product. Our first year, I worked on a farm that was one of the first farms to get, a group of the first farms to get licensed in this county. The first thing I did is I looked up every distributor I could find in the state. And in December, we still hadn't sold everything. I sat there and I called hundreds of people, and I cold called their cell phones, and it was embarrassing, but I made some great connections. And you kind of just have to really put yourself out there. It's not easy. It's gotten easier. There are new platforms like, oh shoot, I'm blanking. It's like a compliance cannabis. There's new platforms where you can put your product out there and make connections. But you need to be able to continually follow through with them, and you need to pick someone who's going to follow through for you as well.
That is great advice when we think about the market conditions, et cetera. So thank you for that, Emily. All right, we're going to go to our very last question, and then we're going to go into some of the audience questions that have come up. So thanks everyone for everyone's that have been putting questions into the chat. Looks like there's been some good dialogue there. So this is our webinar, where to start, things to consider. And so this is our area. I want to go into advice to new applicants, people who are considering the permit process. What are the 3 to 5 questions that you all, our lovely panelists, would recommend that those that are considering this permit process ask themselves before they even enter the permit process? What do they need to make sure that they have? What do they need to ask themselves before they even get started pulling permits, doing site plans, anything like that? What do you wish you had thought about before you started the process? Julia, I'll start with you.
Well, I guess that I wish that we had thought it through a little more clearly. We just, literally went, okay, let's get licensed. That's like what we did. Yeah, it was kind of like, well, we want to keep growing. We don't want to, now that it's, we lose our opportunity, let's just get licensed. So we just kind of stumbled forward, and it worked for us to a certain degree, but at the same time, it would be good to, and we did examine things in a pretty careful way. So I think that really important questions is like, why do I want to be a cultivator? Just because you see billions of dollars in the market and you think, oh, I'm going to grow weed and I'm going to make all this money, it's just like any other business. You're more than likely, it's like 50-50 that you're going to fail. So I think it's really important to evaluate, what if this business fails for me? What is that going to mean for me? Can I afford that? So I think it's really important to do risk assessments and analyze the impact of, can I afford this? Can I get funding? If the business fails, how does that impact my life, the life of my investors, whatever's going on? So I think it's important to be really gritty about what happens if it doesn't work. And I know that is something that was part of our process. Is like, okay, if it doesn't work, then this is this, then it means this, this, and this. So I see a lot of people think that they're just going to succeed because they think they're going to succeed because they want to. And I think that's imprudent. I think you really need to have a really good plan if it doesn't work for you. And then again, like, what are the impacts going to be on my property? Like, to get licensed, is this really what I want to do to my property? Like, do I want to clear this, make this road, do that? That's something that we find that we're doing things to our property that we never imagined that we would. And, we're making those choices, but those are, and they're not all bad, but we're cutting down trees that we didn't really want to or plan to. And, things like that, kind of like look at it with a very critical eye about what is my life going to be like once I get there? And if it fails, what is that going to mean to me and my family and my investors?
Thank you, Julia. You bring up so many great points, and that one, the very first one you made of, well, let's get licensed, let's just do that. That is very, very common. I think that we've found with a lot of our members, and as the game is shifting a little bit, market conditions are shifting. Really having some of these, really thinking things out through the business plan is even more important than many of us that were crazy enough to get started in it the first year. But no, that's definitely very common with so many of us and so many of our members. Emily, let's go to you next for some of advice, 3 to 5 things that you would recommend people ask themselves before they enter the permit process.
Okay, let's go to my list here. Are you committed to this process? I would ask yourself, going into this, how much energy are you willing to spend to get to the finish line? It takes so much time and energy. It's going to be the biggest focus in your life going through this. So just make sure that you're really dedicated to that process, and make sure you understand what that entails as far as your involvement monetarily and your involvement of physical labor or time. That, are you committed to this? Secondly, can you afford to execute the plan that you're proposing? Is this a pie in the sky goal, or is this something that's attainable for you? And touching on that, you can make your plan more simple and make your money back and then come at it with more funds, but just definitely ask yourself if it's a reasonable plan. Third, what is your realistic timeline? Are you going to need to wait for weather to clear before you can start doing construction? Is it unreasonable to think that you're going to finish building your site in the middle of February? Probably. Be aware of your timeline and accept the fact that you need to have some patience and it's going to take time. I think, when I first went into either overseeing permits or getting a permit myself for the business I worked for, I don't think any of us really anticipated the first year how much effort and time it was going to take. Even the first ADP meetings, we were all fired up, ready to go. Be realistic about your timeline, and now you can follow in the footsteps of people who really slogged through it to make this process so much more streamlined. Fourth, I would say, ask yourself if this is the lowest impact plan you can come up with. Are you going to still be a good steward of the environment going forward with your plan? Do you Julia talked about, how do you feel about the tree removal or the grading or the disturbance that you're creating? Are you comfortable with that? Is your water source stable? Is your water source legal? Does your site have realistic longevity? We have a lot of environmental rules that we do need to comply with, but even just on a moral standard, it's good to ask yourself if you feel like you can continue to be a good steward of the environment with your site in the way that you're proposing it. Lastly, kind of an unpopular one, can you possibly afford to take a year off? Depending on when you submit your application, and like Diana, you mentioned earlier, we no longer have a plants and ground policy. So as soon as you put your application in, everybody in the county, in the state, all these different agencies, they're aware of the fact that you are a cannabis facility trying to get licensed. You're not going to be able to just fly under the radar and put a big crop out there and wing it. You really don't want to work so hard doing all of this just to lose everything that you worked for. So when you're inspecting your timeline and you're talking to your professionals you're working with, it's really important to be aware of the fact that depending on when your anticipated end date is, unfortunately, it might be a time where you don't get to grow for the spring, or if you're an outdoor farmer, that's the hardest part. I would definitely start now if you want to plant in May or June. Your timeline, definitely pay attention to that, to where you don't put yourself in a position where you're without income for a year. That's my list.
Such great advice. Those are great questions to ask yourself. And John, if you can close us out with the advice, things to ask yourself before you get started. What do you wish you had?
Yeah, I mean, all great points too, by the way. You guys kind of took some of mine. But I mentioned it earlier. Once you get through this process, where are you going to sell your weed? I mean, who do you know in the industry? What relationships do you have? Have you built, are you the type of person while working in the traditional industry that you have consistent buyers all the time? Like, are you known for a good quality product? Because if you don't, how are you going to build those relationships once you get licensed? So that's the first thing. And that's, Monica asked the question there, you just need to start talking with people that are in the game. There's a lot of talk on the outside, you should do this, you should do that, but you need to talk to people that are in it and experiencing it firsthand of what's going on in the marketplace. So if you can answer yourself that question, say, yeah, great, I have outlets for it, I'm a good producer, I'm going to move forward. Second question is, and both Julia and Emily touched on it, how well financed am I? Can I afford to make this plan happen? Can I afford to sit a year out? It's going to happen. You're going to have to sit a year out, to make it happen, unless it's a super simple plan and you really time it well. But odds are you're going to have to lose a season. And can I afford to do that? Can I afford, once I get operational, to not pay myself for a year or two? Because you're going to be maybe you have to get an investor. They're going to get paid first. The state, the county, everyone gets paid before you get paid, your employees. So, can I afford to not only make it through the process, can I afford to run my business now for a year or two until I can get into the black? Third question, am I a commercial operator? Are you used to growing 20 plants in your backyard and smoking joints all day? Or are you a turn and burn commercial farmer? Because there's a big difference. And I think you could probably talk to some of the people that went through the program first, that they're learning that there's a big difference between the two. And I don't care whether you're growing 2,500 square feet or you're growing 25 acres. It's a different mindset being a commercial operator. Do you know how much it costs you to produce a pound, start to finish? How much does it cost? Because if it costs you $800 to grow a pound and you're only getting $400 for it, well, good luck staying in business. You need to know what your operational costs are. You need to know how long it's going to take for you to get profitable. You need to learn what your return on investment is. How long is it? So, I mean, there's a big difference, and it's hard. It's a tough transition because coming from the traditional market, there's, you know, you could do that. You could just grow 20 plants in your backyard and it would be a nice little supplemental income. That's not the case anymore. That's not the way the game is played. So you have to make a very, you know, look in the mirror and say, am I a commercial operator or am I not? Because like Emily said, you better be 100% committed to this process, not only getting permitted, but then once you do, you got to figure out how to run a business in this marketplace. And so it's a totally different mindset than it was in the traditional days. And then I would say, last question, what's your end game? You know, what's your exit strategy? Do you have one? Do you have a plan at all? You know, like Julia said, you know, and I did the same thing. We're just like, yeah, let's just get licensed. You know what I mean? And it's like my business plan has evolved into something more complicated than that. And I feel good about it moving forward. But, you know, you have to, you really have to think about that. Like, how do I want to farm forever? You know, am I going to be making all of these improvements to my property, or maybe not improvements? Am I going to destroy my property to get this place permitted? And then if I go out of business, am I even going to be able to sell it? Is it going to be valuable at all? You know, so like all these things have to be factored in. You know, it's that old saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? You know what I mean? You have to determine that. And it's different for everyone. For some, it's going to work. For some, it's not, you know, so you just got to be real with yourself, but understand that the game is changed and you have to be willing to commit yourself to it. And like Emily said, if you're sitting on product, you have to be willing to sit down at a list of 1,000 distributors and call every single one and try to sell your product, because no one's going to do it for you. So it's just, it's real.
Well said. Really well said, John, and to all of our panelists, thank you so much. These are all important things and that people have to think about realistically before you pull permits, before you get your site plan. So where we're going to go now is we are going to go into some of the questions in the chat. And if people have questions that they want to add, use the Q&A function on your Zoom, or right here on the dashboard. But let's go into some of these questions that have come in, and let's get into it. Let's see here. So the first question from Robert is, do you submit the initial plan first and then implement, or do you implement before the submission, road improvements, etc.? If submit first, do you start implementation or wait for review? So if implementation, do you mean like getting started on your project? Or maybe I'm hearing that differently, but you can't do anything until you get your project approved. Okay, yeah, okay, that was yes. Yeah, no, you have to get all of your approvals and go through everything before you can start your project at all. Sometimes there's allowances for a transition period if you have to upgrade different things on your property, build a house, some other things fit under there that you can get started growing before then. But you have to submit, you absolutely have to submit first and go through your correction process, etc., before you can put your plants in the ground. The next question is, can you explain how growing in a greenhouse without lights is considered an outdoor license type? Who wants to take that? Emily, please.
I think that was in a response to something I said earlier.
Oh.
So yes, you can be under a state definition as outdoor growing in a greenhouse if you have no supplemental lighting and you are not using light deprivation. This comes into play for some outdoor farmers who are growing in higher elevations. You might just want to protect your plants, but you are not allowed to use light deprivation. You can't pull tarps. You have to just use the natural sun cycle. So, but it can be within a greenhouse structure. As far as that goes with the county, it would be really good to call that out very, very clearly on your plan. And so when it gets approved, you're not paying taxes on a mixed light cultivation when you are in fact a outdoor cultivator, but it is possible. I just recently did a permit type like that.
Great.
hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, question. There are multiple agencies that require different information, sometimes at a pretty detailed level. How do you fit all of that into on a site plan, or do you attach a game plan document behind the plan that spells everything out? And I see John has a great answer here, which is you need to work with a vetted design professional that knows how to put together a proper site plan and appropriate paperwork. And that's about right. Yeah, that sums it up. I definitely would recommend, and here at the Alliance, we definitely recommend when you're putting together a site plan, although one could do it themselves if they have the experience, we really, really recommend using a professional for specifically the site plan, because you don't want to, this is a game to, you got to meet certain timelines to put your plants in the ground, and you don't want holdups. It's worth the cost to work with a vetted professional on that site plan, because it's true, there's different submissions to the water board, to the state, and to the county, and they do require different things, and you want to make sure that you're getting it right. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Well, I just want to say that we did our own site plan and it was a disaster. So it's the one thing that if you don't want to spend money on anything, get a professional to come in and give you a site plan that is right to start with, because everything is driven from that. So if your well isn't on your site plan exactly where it is, and it just screws everything up. So totally, that is definitely the way to go. And it's not that expensive in the big scheme of things, and then once it's done, it's done. There's not a whole lot that's going to change about it, unless you're putting structures or stuff. But definitely go with getting a professional to do it.
Right. John?
Yeah, I just echo that. I think a lot of people run into mistakes. Like in the past, I did my own site plan when I built a shop on my property 8 years ago, and I was able to hand draw it, and the county didn't care because it's just a residential ag building. So people get into trouble because they're like, oh, I did it back then for my simple building permit and I can do it again now, but you can't. This is commercial land use development, not a residential shed. You know what I mean? So there's a big difference. You need to work with people that know what they're doing, that again are vetted, that have got people through the process before. Don't waste your time with someone, a newbie that you're paying for them to learn the mistakes. So, the Alliance has a list of vetted design professionals here in the county, and work with people that know what they're doing.
And I think that when I hear people talking and complaining about all the regulations that are coming on, it is this distinction, is that you're now a commercial grower, and it's a whole different ball game. That is the distinction. And people, I hear the people talking and the chatting and all that, and people are resisting that. Well, why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Well, because it's not in code. And because you're a commercial grower now, you have to comply with all of these codes. And it applies to everybody. You're not being singled out. The cannabis is not being singled out. It's just the codes that are there for everybody. And because people aren't used to doing a commercial project, we're feeling like persecuted, but it isn't. It's just the way it is.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would echo that. Yep. Do not skimp on the site plan. Definitely the state application, the water board, even Fish and Game, there's a lot of resources to help people. We have workshops, webinars, free, open to the public, that go step by step how to do those. Those are definitely, one could do that as an applicant, but you want a professional for the site plan. All right, let's keep cruising. Monica asked a question regarding knowing your business before starting. How should farmers learn about the California market to decide if they will offer flower, fresh frozen, what distributor to work with, local markets versus the state, and whether or not to brand? And I'm just going to give the Alliance, resources that we have, and then I'm going to hand it to you, John, and anyone else that wants to answer that. But here at the Alliance, we do at least twice a year a meet your local supply chain networking events. We've done meet distributor events. So we try to do as many networking events as possible to connect various people in the industry. COVID has made that really difficult. And we also do regular webinars with an organization called Head Start, which does market analysis and market data. And we do have a member call coming up in a couple weeks, specifically focused on the craft market and trends in the craft market. So those are some resources that we have. And John, do you want to take it from here?
I mean, yeah, just like I said before, you need to start networking with people that are in the industry. You know, everyone's pretty open, you know, about, you know, no one's holding out secrets for the most part. You can talk to our local licensed cultivators. You know, they can tell you what they're experiencing. You can talk to our local distributors and manufacturers. They can tell you what they're hearing, you know, as far as pricing and stuff goes. You can talk to our local retailer. He can tell you what's selling, what's not selling, at what price point, you know, and start, you know, be a detective of finding this insider information, basically. I mean, it's out there. You just have to be willing to talk with people, but you have to hear it firsthand from people in the game, because they're the ones that know, you know, they know where the market is at. And it's like we said, it's not just about farming anymore. You know, you have to be your own marketing person. You have to be your own PR person. You have to be your own networker. You have to be your own salesperson. You know what I mean? So you're going to wear all these different hats. But what you don't want to do is just go into it blindly. You need to listen to people that are experiencing, you know, that know what they're experiencing right now, and listen to it and take it to heart, because it's true.
Thank you, John. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
I'll quickly touch on the decision to, oh, my dogs, whether or not to brand. As a small farm, and even 10,000 square feet is considered pretty small in the grand scheme of things. Making the decision to have a brand it's a big choice. It's going to take a lot of dedication, and you really need to ask yourself whether or not you can sustain that, and if you can keep shelf space. I think it's really helpful and healthy for small farmers to get involved in cooperatives, to get involved in ways where you can have agency over your product representation a little bit more, and you can put yourself out there in a healthier capacity for your business. The decision also as to which way you're going to sell your product. Is it going to be bulk flower, fresh frozen? You got to ask yourself, same as the traditional market, when do you need to see a return on that? If you're going to be going into your business plan just doing fresh frozen because you want to avoid building something, and all of a sudden, you know, you got to think, how many people does it take to process 10,000 square feet of fresh frozen? Last time I did a fresh frozen harvest, I worked for 15 hours and I didn't sit down. It's a lot of work. You need to have the refrigerators they have and all that. It's a lot of work to do that, and you're not just going to get paid out immediately, especially if it's a huge amount of product that you're moving. Most likely, if you can negotiate a good deal, you'll get paid some, and you'll get paid some later, or you'll get paid back in product that you'll have to sell and move with a distributor you trust. It's going to take time for you to see a return. It's not going to be immediate. If you're selling bulk flower, you're going to have cash in your hand immediately as soon as you can find a buyer who's interested in purchasing at the rate that you want to sell it for. So that is definitely a consideration. There's also considerations of what cultivars you want to grow. And again, like we were talking about, do your research, talk to the retailers, talk to distributors, other farmers, go and look at what's on the shelves. We don't have in-person meetings right now, but you know, unexpected places can yield really good information. The Wine and Weed Symposium had a 3-hour discussion by BDS Analytics on cannabis purchasing, and it was the most fascinating thing. I learned so much about like elderly people and what they purchase that I never thought about before. You learn about the trends in RSO. There's so much information out there, but you really have to dedicate yourself to just diving headfirst into it. And yeah, but the first place you can start, like Diana mentioned, is just get involved in your community discussions. And that's like step one, I think.
Thanks for that. And yeah, plug for our event or our call. I think it's September 13th. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Maggie, but it is all about market trends in the craft industry here in California. All right, we're gonna keep cruising. The question is, how much is a fire hydrant to install? And does anyone on this call have that exact figure from a professional, have a professional install it? I have it if someone does it themselves. Do you know around?
Last time I had to install that system, I think we got a bit of a homie discount, but it was $2,600 including parts, and that was just for the bulkhead connection to 18,000 gallons of water. It did not include the purchase of the water tanks. Those are more and more challenging to get these days.
John, please. Yeah.
And yeah, add those to your list of hats that you need to wear. You better learn how to start doing some of this stuff on your own. You know, like, it's simple plumbing. People should have experience doing that, doing cultivation, but you need to find ways to reduce your labor costs as much as possible. You know, the tank and the parts are one price, but you're going to pay double to have someone install it. So get ready to do the manual labor yourself.
Yeah, I think or at least one of our members, something of who did it, it was, you know, several days of trenching, followed by laying all the pipe, but, you know, driving and buying the water tank, hooking up the water tank to the piping, getting all the plumbing and everything. So it was a lot, but there was definitely money saved. And then I saw Stephen had a follow-up question: is this required? And it is required if there's a permitted structure, if there is a commercial structure on the property associated with the grow. Does anyone else want to add anything about the fire hydrant? Yeah, John?
It's also, I mean, it's required for a shipping container you just want to use for storage too, but not necessarily a commercial structure.
Yeah, well, sorry, I should rephrase that. Any structure used for a commercial purpose.
Yeah. Solid walls. That's the last interpretation I got from Scott. It was if it has solid walls, he's gonna want it to have a water source. So like an ag exempt hoop house would not qualify, which is pretty cool.
And John, you're absolutely right.
It's a relatively, out of everything, it's relatively low cost, and it's just a nice thing to have on your property no matter what. So I would plan on doing one no matter what.
Yeah. All right. What is the state tax per pound? And John answered that, $154.40 a pound. If you miss a permit payment, is there a grace period or warning, or do they shut you down? Emily, do you want to take that?
As far as the state is concerned, if you miss a payment, you can negotiate a 30-day extension. That's the best I've been able to do. If you're able to prove there's an emergency, which a lot of people last year for COVID, they were able to use that and qualify. If there's a fire or if there's something truly disastrous that happens, you can negotiate with the state to give you some time. If you are renewing your license and you are paying with cash and you go and you state that in your renewal, you have, I think it's just 30 days, might be longer, but you have a small amount of time to then schedule a cash payment to drop off that cash. I have not yet encountered what happens in Nevada County if you don't make your payments for your permits. I hope I never get to find out. You might be able to find some wiggle room, but the permit fee is so low, I would not, plan on being able to pay it.
Thanks for that. Does anyone else want to add anything?
Got to pay to play.
That's the name of the game. Yes. All right. Can you have 2 permitted greenhouses on ag zone property in Nevada County, one for cannabis and one for produce? And the answer is yes, you can. And there is if it's an ag exempt, greenhouse or hoop house. There are some requirements around that, and if you can email us at info@nccannabisalliance.org, and we can share with you that policy that recently was changed about a year and a half ago. But yes, you can grow cannabis and produce on the same property. Definitely encouraged. Okay. Okay, what are the chances Nevada County will approve manufacturing and micro business licenses? That is exactly what we are working on right now, and we are encouraging members and those in the community to get involved in that discussion. We will be having a members meeting next week to discuss some next steps of policy, and so we'll be putting out some ways that people can get involved in those discussions. But yes, we absolutely see, understand, and know that the next steps of policy here are really going to be around manufacturing and micro business. All right. Are there any special programs for veterans or and people of color? And I'm so happy you mentioned this and brought up this question, Stephen, because this is an area that I'm really excited about, and I know that many of us here at the Alliance are, is that we've been working with the county and advocating for about a year and a half, 2 years now, for an equity program here in Nevada County that would provide financial assistance through the form of grants, fee waivers, fees for business skills trainings for people that have been impacted by the war on drugs. And so that can be, there's various levels of eligibility for that. And so that's in the development phase right now. And there is a program, an equity program that is being established right now for the community. It has not yet been approved by the Board of Supervisors. But once that gets approved, our county will be able to apply for grant money, which could be up to $1 million, which could then come back to the community for people that have been impacted by prohibition. So it's a really exciting program, and we'll be sharing more in our newsletters about that. But does anyone want to add anything to that?
I can add that if you have served in the military, that you are supposed to get priority review for your state application.
Great point. Thank you, Emily. Raphael asked, how much does it all cost? And yeah, there's a lot of factors there. What I would recommend is, we actually at the start of this call went through a whole kind of topic on cost considerations based on different business models, different growing styles. And so this is recorded and available. So I would go back and listen to that, because it's a in-depth conversation, depending on what your build-out costs are, what your permitting costs, and what your growing models are. Does anyone else want to add anything to that? Okay. And the question: Are shipping containers approved for processing space? And the answer is, well, a shipping container could be. Well, I'm going to give that to you, Emily.
Fun. Yes, it can be. If you have no power in it at all, and you are only storing product in there, you are not trimming, you are not having any immature plants in there, you could ag exempt it, I believe is the interpretation presently. As soon as you put power in it, or as soon as you have people actively working in it, like trimming, cutting clones, you are going to need to permit it the same as you would any other commercial building. I know that right now, I'm forgetting the word, there's like a tie down that you have to do. You have to somehow anchor it. You have to anchor it, is one thing you're going to anticipate doing. It's also going to need to be ADA access friendly. So you're going to need to make sure that your doors on your shipping container are adjusted to accommodate that. And you are going to need to submit a F1 commercial permit for those shipping containers. I think a lot of people got really excited about shipping containers last year, and I think a lot of us are finding out they're not the Hail Mary we thought they were. If you are thinking of using shipping containers because they're cheap and easy, I would definitely just recommend really assessing that and talking to your architect, making sure that that is a correct assumption for your site. Otherwise, you're stuck with some very expensive shipping containers that are maybe not what you really need to work in. It might end up being more cost effective and just better for you in the long run to put up a prefab structure and work with that.
Thanks for that, John. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, John.
The county does not like shipping containers. I mean, we fought long and hard over this one, trying to get them to be allowed for processing and what have you. They've conceded a little bit. They've allowed it for storage. They've allowed 500 square feet, basically you can use it for harvest storage, but no drying, no trimming, no employees, unless you want to do that effluent conversion. And we've worked a long time on that one too, and it's just not cost feasible. I mean, for the cost to convert a shipping container to F1 standards for 320 square feet of space just doesn't make sense. You're better off just investing into a building that you want to use and that's realistic for your business. So yeah, unfortunately, some counties allow shipping containers. Nevada County, it's not really a viable option.
Thanks, John. All righty, let's go into some of these questions. Colin asked, for off-grid facilities, what alternative power options are there, or is there an ability to use a generator? Would anyone like to take that? John, yeah.
Permitted solar. That's pretty much your only option if you're off-grid. You can't use a generator except for emergency backup.
Thanks a lot. Alrighty, how much does it cost to have a professional do the site plan? Anyone want to take that?
It's really going to depend on how much that site plan needs. If your site plan and your ADP is being lumped in with a grading plan, it's going to be more expensive. If you have a very large property and and you need to do a topographic study, that's going to be more expensive. If you can have a drone come out there and do site photos and topography using a drone or an airplane, that's going to be more expensive. On the low end, like $4,000. On the high end, $9,000. Maybe Julia and John can speak to their experiences when they had design professionals do theirs as well.
I would advise people not to do what I did, and that's work with like 5 different design professionals to do different site plans for you. Just work with one good one. Most of the design professionals now are kind of offering a package type deal, right? Where they're doing your topo, they're putting together your county site plan, your state site plan, your water board site plan, and your Department of Fish and Wildlife site plan, and usually including a grading plan if it needs it, and kind of doing it as a package deal. And most of them are charged around 20, 25 grand for kind of the total package.
Julie, did you have something you wanted to add?
I remember getting a quote for somebody at one point for doing a kind of package deal, not as full-breasted as what John is suggesting, for between 10 and 12. So I think there's a local engineer that will get you everything you need for in that range, the $10,000 to $12,000 range. But the other thing to really realize about this is that they may not be able to work with you for 3 months down the tubes, So if you're going to go that route, you really want to get in the queue with that. So I believe that we got our site plan for in the $2,000 to $4,000 range for what we needed, because we had a lot of work done already. We had to have surveyors come out and do some surveying so that we could get numbers and get things trued up. And that whole thing, I guess it probably was in the $4,000 range by the time everything was said and done. Worth every penny.
Perfect. That's really helpful. And I'll also say that I've heard on that, for something basic, a state site plan, CDFA site plan, a local site plan, and what you need for the water board. I've seen it for around $2,000 or $3,000. yeah, definitely when you go back for revisions and changes, that will impact the price, but shop around, shop around, shop around, shop around, ask a lot of questions, and make sure that you are vetting people using that document that we have that's on our Alliance website, because do not get taken advantage of. There's a lot of people taking advantage of people going through this process. So make sure you are vetting people. If it seems really expensive, ask questions. John.
Yeah, and make sure that when you are interviewing these design professionals, that they give you a cost breakdown of what you're being charged for, and that you have a signed contract with them and they're held to those prices. And don't just, go willy-nilly into someone and just say, hey, go for it, just give me what I need, because you're going to end up with a big fat bill at the end and have no way, and they're not going to have to justify their cost to you. So get it on paper, make sure it's all signed and you're in a contract with these people, and then they're being held to that price unless you go in and change your plan a bunch of times and add a bunch of additional stuff. But everything from now on should be in paper, in writing, signed by both parties, with an itemized price breakdown on every service they're providing.
Well said. And use us, those that are members of the Alliance, use us as a resource. We are here to be your advocate. We're looking out for your interests. And so, reach out to us if something feels a little fishy, and we can give you some, we can look at things for you and help you out there. Let's keep cruising, because I know we're getting up to our end of this call. So the question is, does the county allow the use of ag exempt structures for things like dry sheds, storage sheds, etc.? We know ag exempt greenhouses are allowed, but what about other structures? Who would like to take that?
I can answer a little bit about that. Emily's probably more qualified, but it really has to do with whether you have employees or not. So if you're an owner and you're the only one working on your farm, you can do all kinds of stuff that you can't do if you have employees. And that includes with the containers and things like that. Like if you don't have employees or below a certain threshold, you don't have to meet certain standards. So it's very specific to your project. But my understanding is that you can't store cannabis in anything unless you've got a fire alarm. You have to have fire alarms for
things have
all
shifted.
Stuff.
Yeah, things have shifted a little bit. I'm gonna and Emily, I'll hand it over to you. Yeah, that one has shifted just a touch.
Yeah, that's an ongoing discussion, and the NCCA has done a really great job in advocating for more reasonable policy decisions regarding the use of ag exempt structures. Like you said with the fire alarms, so let's say you wanted to dry in an ag exempt hoop house. It's my understanding you don't need a fire alarm in an ag exempt hoop house you're drying in. That would not be required. It's really about the usage. So if you had a 200 square foot shed and you wanted to use it as your trimming shed, even though that structure would qualify as an ag exempt structure, if you have no power to it, it's 200 square feet, you get one of those on your property. The fact that you have people trimming in there, even if it's you're still going to have to permit that. And you have to establish whether or not it's worth it for you to convert a 200 square foot space simply for that usage. Maybe it's not. There are exemptions. So the ag exemptions are meant really residentially. We pushed to allow for the use of greenhouses, but the only thing that I'm aware of that you can do in a solid four-walled ag exempt structure is storage. That's all that I'm aware of you can do. You can't trim in it. You can't have immature plants in it.
And you can't store cannabis in it. You can store other things, but you can't store cannabis
in it now.
Is that
so that the policy that Julia, you're referring, so everybody knows there had been some very restrictive policy on shipping containers from the fire department, which have been changed. So now, yes, you can have cannabis stored in, you can have things stored in there, and but you do not need to have you don't have to have a fire alarm.
Yeah. If whoever is interested in learning more about the ag exempt information online, the county does have a very concise handout about greenhouses, the new ag exempt policy decisions regarding greenhouses and other structures. There are setbacks to things like livestock enclosures or shade structures or pole barns. Each of them has their own rule, and they have their own parameters in which they're allowed to be exempt on your property. I would refer to that handout, and definitely, even if you have a small pole barn on your property and you are going to get a permit and it's used residentially, you're still going to have to get an agricultural exemption agreement for that structure. So it's good to be aware of what's on your property and whether or not you can exempt it.
Thank you so much. And how does CDFW handle irrigation ditch water NID? Is a permit needed if that's our water source? I know that John, you have experience. Yeah, would you like to take that?
It's just your water source. So you just, when you apply to the state, you send in a copy of your bill from NID, basically, that you have a legal water source, and that's it. There's not a special permit from CDFW that you need to use that irrigation water.
Great, thank you. How good does the road to your property have to be? My road is not paved and a little rough. Well, yeah, John.
It has to be to commercial standards. So unfortunately, there's not a clear consensus between the 3 different fire districts within the county. Each one is, enforcing a little bit differently. But, at the minimum, it's got to be 12 feet wide. At the maximum, it's got to be 20 feet wide. So, and there's certain slope percentages. If it's over 16% grade, then it has to be paved in that section. So it has to be. It's all up to the fire department. It has to be to commercial road standards.
And then there's also some, oh yeah, Emily, please.
I did just want to mention something that could be really helpful, is let's say you have a road that goes up to your house and then it goes to a commercial building. That's going to have to meet commercial roadway standards. If that road continues up to your garden site and you have strictly ag exempt buildings up, like structures up there, or if you're just an outdoor facility, that portion of the road does not have to be improved. For all they know, you could just be going up there in an ATV. So when you're designing your site or you're upgrading your site, definitely consider the placement of either your as-built commercial structures, what you're going to turn into a commercial structure, or where you're going to put a new commercial structure, and try and put it in a place where it's going to be least impactful when it comes to whatever roadway expansion you might have to make.
Yes, John.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, if you go down into the valley and you look at Walnut or Almond Farms or whatever, you always see the commercial building is right along the side of the road, right? Because it's the easiest and the cheapest place to do it. So you want to take those things into consideration. The further away your building is, or your operation is away from your property line, the more expensive it's going to get. So, and just something to keep in mind, the layout of your project is going to be very important to determine the overall cost of it.
Thank you. And then with road standards, there's also Department of Public Work road standards that come into play at times, depending on how many employees you have. I don't know if that was, yeah. Oh, Emily, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so DPW has really been cracking down, regardless of if you have employees or not, in regards to your private driveway's connection to a public road. And if you do not have proof of your encroachment meeting the standard it needs to, either residentially or commercially, you're going to have to get an encroachment permit that covers an asphalt or concrete apron that goes connecting your road to the county and the public road. That can get a little pricey, and I've had a lot more of those comments come up this year from Public Works. So it is something really to be aware of, is your encroachment. You may end up having to get an encroachment permit.
True. All righty, let's go to our last 2 questions. And this one is, how long does it realistically take to get a permit for a metal processing building or prefab home from the county? Last I heard it was 8 months. Any plans to help speed things up? Does anyone have experience with that would like to answer that? Is able to answer that?
I guess I'll go for it. 8 months is great. That it's a lot of review time that it takes for these buildings, especially if you have grading involved in a new pad for that structure. Uh, the fastest I've really seen for an approval is 4 months, and that was a small structure that had a lot of attention given to it. You still have to build it and then go through, I think it's like 20 different inspections. John, didn't you put up a F1 facility recently, right? I'm not sure if that was an as-built or if it was new.
Yeah, it was a change of use, so mine was a little different. But I mean, you just got to think everything slowed down because of COVID. Building materials are through the roof. You're dealing with the county, most likely you're grading, and then you're dealing with construction. So I mean, it's just things just take time, and like what we said before, expect everything to take twice the amount of time and cost twice as much money as you think it's going to. It's just, unfortunately, you're dealing with government bureaucracy here, and they move at their own pace, and there's just not a whole lot of things to speed things up. I would say one thing that may help with the building is to pull a shell permit for it first, which is just basically you're just building a permitted structure with 4 walls and you're not doing a build out on the inside. That's going to speed things up, and then it'll also spread the cost out a little bit. So you can permit the shell of the building, and then you can do a tenant improvement permit down the road as you want to build it out into processing rooms or dry rooms or whatever. But that may speed things up a little bit, but it just is what it is.
Great. And our last question here do we have to have a separate well for cultivation from the well to our house? We work and live off one. And the answer is no, you don't. You can have separate. Emily, do you want to say something?
Yeah, about the wells, this year I've seen more unpermitted wells than I ever have before in my line of work. When you're getting ready to permit your property, one of the first things you need to do is assess your water source. The Alliance had a really great few webinars recently talking about water source and how to assess it. If you have a well that's an ag well and you're not serving your property with it, you don't need to go through the same rigmarole you would if you have a well that's servicing your house. If you have a well that was dug in the 1970s, or if there's no record of your well, there's no well completion report with the water board, you're going to need to go through a process called a raw water certificate. So you're going to need to have your well inspected by a licensed well driller. They're going to have to do a report talking about the status of your well. And you're going to have to complete a bacteriological and nitrate panel on the water. And you're going to have to do that testing every year to prove that your well can support residential use and that it is potable water. If you have a residential well on your property and an ag well, that's fine. But if your residential well is going to be scrutinized much, much heavier, definitely check and see if you have a well permit. Just because your residence has a well that serves it doesn't necessarily mean that well was drilled with the benefit of a permit. And that can slow up your process because you're going to need to schedule a well driller to come out, and you're going to need to wait for that nitrate panel to come back. And hopefully you don't have to shock your well. Hope your water's all clear. But that is something that I've encountered a lot more this year than I have normally. So I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, John.
I'm going to take back my answer for what's the first question I would consider asking myself before getting permitted. What's my water source? Because there's a lot of permitted 10K farms in the county right now that have bone dry wells, and it's pretty hard to grow weed if you don't have any water. So you better make sure you have a good producing well, or you have access to irrigation water. preferably, but not everyone has access to that. But if you buy a property that has a 2-gallon a minute well and you expect to grow 10,000 square feet of cannabis, good luck to you, because you can't bring in trucked water. And with this drought that we're experiencing, it's a make or break for your property. Just if you don't have the water, you can't be a farmer. So that's the number one thing you should be considering.
Well said, John. And for those that are interested, we have been doing a lot of education around drought considerations. We had a workshop for our members last month on water management systems as it relates to drought, and water consciousness around growing with in this drought, as well as some hydrology. We also had a hydrologist talk to us about wells and groundwater. So there's a lot of education out there, and I'm going to hand it over to Maggie. And thank you all for participating in this session with us.
What a wealth of information. I just thank all 4 of you so much for this. For everybody on the call, our next Get Legit webinar is Thursday, September 9th. It is with the Water Board, Fish and Wildlife, and the Division of Water Rights. As Emily mentioned, that is one of the places to start. So make sure they will be guiding people through each of their application processes and making themselves available to you for further communication. So make sure to tune into that. There's a link in the chat for where you can register for all of the upcoming webinars in this series, as well as where you will find the recordings of this webinar and the future ones posted on our website. This is just, I can't stress enough how important and grateful we are for this information and for all of you sharing your experiences. It really, we're in it for the long haul here in Nevada County, and it's not a get rich quick situation, and we want everybody to make really educated choices as they go into this. And as Emily said, be really low impact and be great environmental stewards of your land and our watersheds here. And so please feel free to spread the news about this webinar series and register for the upcoming ones. Reach out to us at the Alliance anytime, info@nccannabisalliance.org. Become a member if you are not already, and we will see you in September. Thanks so much, everybody.